There are words you have repeated so many times, you no longer hear them. I'm just like this. I've never been good at that. People always leave. I can't trust anyone. Nothing ever works for me. I'm too old. I'm too late. I'm not that kind of person. They sound harmless, almost ordinary. But what if these sentences are doing more than describing your life? What if, little by little, they are teaching your mind what kind of life to expect? Carl Jung understood that human beings do not experience reality only through events. We experience it through meaning. And meaning is carried by language. A single event can mean humiliation to one person and initiation to another. A breakup can mean, I was never worthy of love. Or, this relationship revealed what I still need to understand about myself. The event remains the same. The psychological world created around it changes completely, and that world is built partly through words. Imagine two people standing before the same closed door. One says, "This always happens to me." The other says, "What is this showing me?" The door has not moved, but the mind facing it has already entered two different realities. This is why your inner dialogue matters. Not because words magically command the universe, not because repeating a sentence forces reality to obey, but because language organizes attention. Attention shapes interpretation. Interpretation influences emotion. Emotion influences behavior. And behavior, repeated long enough, becomes a life. Most people never notice this process. They believe they are simply reporting what is happening. But sometimes, they are rehearsing an identity. Every time you say, "I'm terrible with people," the sentence quietly becomes evidence. You remember the awkward conversations and forget the moments of connection. Every time you say, "I always ruin good things," your mind begins searching through memory, collecting proof. Soon, the sentence no longer feels like an opinion. It feels like truth. Jung spent decades listening to the language people use to describe themselves, because language often reveals the unconscious long before the person understands what is happening inside them. A patient might say, "I have to be strong." Another, "I can't disappoint anyone." Another, "I always end up alone." Behind each sentence, there is often a hidden psychological rule, a rule formed years earlier, sometimes in childhood, sometimes after betrayal, sometimes through family expectations, sometimes through fear. The words come later, but once they appear, they help preserve the rule. This is what makes language so powerful. It can become the voice of an old complex. A wound begins speaking, and eventually, you call its voice your personality. But what if the sentence you have repeated for years is not who you are? What if it is simply the language of a part of you that once learned how to survive? Tonight, we are going to examine the words you use when no one else is listening, the sentences you repeat automatically, the meanings you attach to your past, the stories you tell about your future, because perhaps your life does not need a new slogan. Perhaps it needs a new relationship with the voice inside your own mind, and the first step is learning to hear it. Chapter 1. The sentence that becomes an identity. Think about the way people introduce themselves. Not formally, psychologically. I'm shy. I'm anxious. I'm difficult. I'm independent. I'm unlucky. I'm a perfectionist. I'm the kind of person who... Notice what happens. A repeated behavior becomes a description. The description becomes a label. The label becomes identity, and identity begins shaping future behavior. Carl Jung believed the conscious personality is only part of the psyche, but the ego desperately needs continuity. It wants a stable answer to one question: who am I? So it collects stories, memories, roles, opinions, and especially words. Imagine a child repeatedly hearing, "You're the quiet one." At first, it is simply something adults say, but repeated often enough. The child begins expecting quietness from themselves. They hesitate before speaking. Their hesitation produces fewer social experiences. Fewer social experiences make speaking feel even less familiar. Years later, the adult says, "I've always been shy." Perhaps. But perhaps the identity was reinforced long before they consciously chose it. The same thing happens with countless labels. You're irresponsible. You're too sensitive. You're not academic. You're the strong one. You're difficult. Even positive labels can become prisons. The strong one may believe they are never allowed to need help. The responsible one may become terrified of disappointing anyone. The peaceful one may suppress anger until resentment becomes unbearable. The words create expectations. Expectations influence behavior. Behavior creates evidence. Then the evidence seems to prove the original words. A loop. This is why Jung was so interested in becoming conscious of the hidden structures behind personality. Because what feels natural may simply be familiar. And what feels familiar may have been rehearsed for years through language. Listen carefully to your own sentences, especially the ones beginning with "I am," "I always," "I never." Those phrases can reveal the borders of your current identity, not because every sentence is false, but because identity becomes dangerous when it becomes too rigid. "I failed at this" is very different from "I am a failure. I feel anxious," is different from "I am an anxious person. That relationship ended," is different from "nobody ever stays." One describes an experience. The other turns the experience into a law. And once the mind believes it has discovered a law, it begins interpreting reality through it. This is where words quietly become destiny. Not mystical destiny, psychological destiny. The sentence creates a lens. The lens changes what you notice. What you notice strengthens the sentence. And slowly, a story becomes a world. But a story can be examined. A sentence can be questioned. And the moment you ask, "Is this absolutely true?" something begins opening. Because perhaps you are not the sentence. Perhaps you are the consciousness capable of hearing it. Chapter 2. When the voice in your head is not really yours. Not every sentence in your mind began with you. Some came from parents, teachers, relatives, former partners, authority figures, people whose opinions carried enormous weight, at a time when you had very little power to question them. A child repeatedly hears, "You are too sensitive." Years later, they apologize for feeling deeply. Another hears, "You need to work twice as hard as everyone else." Years later, rest produces guilt. Someone grows up hearing, "People cannot be trusted." Eventually, every act of kindness is examined for hidden motives. The original voice may disappear, but the sentence remains. It changes tone, uses your vocabulary, and eventually sounds like your own thought. Jung understood that the psyche absorbs far more than conscious instruction. It absorbs atmosphere, expectation, emotion, silence. A parent may never say, "You are not enough." But the child may reach that conclusion through constant criticism. A family may never say, "Love must be earned." Yet affection may appear only after achievement. The child learns the rule, then carries it into adulthood. Years later, the person says, "I need to prove myself." But who decided that? Perhaps no one consciously did. The sentence emerged from repeated experience. This is why inner dialogue can be deceptive. It feels intimate, personal, authentic. But intimacy does not guarantee truth. A thought can live inside you and still be inherited. Imagine moving into an old house. The previous owners left messages written inside the walls. You cannot see them, but every room was built around those instructions. Years pass. You begin believing the design reflects your own choices. Then one day, a wall opens. You discover the writing. That is what psychological awareness can feel like. You suddenly recognize, this belief existed before I could evaluate it. This fear was taught. This rule was inherited. This voice belongs to an old world. That discovery does not instantly erase the sentence, but it changes your relationship with it. Instead of asking, why am I so weak? You may realize, I was taught that needing support was weakness. Instead of, why can I never relax? You may understand, I learned that my value depended on productivity. Instead of, why do I expect people to leave? You may see, part of me is still living inside an old experience of abandonment. The language becomes more precise, and precision creates compassion. The sentence no longer describes your entire identity. It describes a part, a history, a pattern. Jung believed that what remains unconscious often appears as fate. But once language becomes conscious, the old rule can finally be examined. Who taught me this? When did I first believe it? What did this sentence protect me from? Does it still belong to the life I am living now? These questions matter because some beliefs were once adaptations. Do not speak may have protected a child in a volatile home. Do not trust may have developed after betrayal. Never depend on anyone may have formed when support repeatedly failed. The sentence may have been intelligent once, but a survival rule can outlive the danger that created it. Then, what once protected you begins limiting you. The voice continues warning, even when the threat is gone. And because it sounds like you obey. This is why changing your internal language is not about replacing every negative thought with a positive one. That would be too shallow. The real task is understanding the psychological function of the sentence. What is it trying to prevent? What identity is it trying to preserve? What fear is hidden beneath it? Imagine someone constantly telling themselves, I don't need anyone. The sentence sounds strong, independent, but perhaps beneath it lives another sentence. If I need someone, they can hurt me. The first sentence is the mask. The second is the wound. Jung's psychology always invites us beneath the surface because the words we repeat consciously often protect meanings we do not want to face. I don't care may mean I care so much that I cannot tolerate the risk. I'm just being realistic. May mean I am afraid to hope. I work better under pressure. May mean I delay because starting exposes me to failure. I'm protecting my peace. May mean I am avoiding the conversation that could change me. Not always, but sometimes. And psychological growth requires enough honesty to ask, because the sentence that protects the wound can also preserve the pattern until the deeper meaning becomes conscious. The same words continue shaping the same reality. Chapter 3. The words of a complex. There are moments when your inner dialogue changes suddenly. You feel calm. Then someone criticizes you. Immediately, the voice becomes harsh. You always ruin everything. You are embarrassing. You should have stayed quiet. Or someone becomes distant, and another voice appears. They are going to leave. You are not important. You need to fix this now. The speed of the change reveals something. This is not careful reflection. A complex has been activated. Jung described complexes as emotionally charged structures within the psyche. When dormant, they remain in the background. When activated, they can temporarily influence perception, memory, emotion, and language. The voice of the complex is usually absolute. It says, always, never, everyone, no one. It does not describe one moment. It turns the moment into a universal law. One mistake becomes, you always fail. One disagreement becomes, nobody understands you. One rejection becomes, you will always be alone. The complex compresses time. The present touches the past. And suddenly the past begins speaking as though it were happening again. This is why emotional reactions can feel much larger than the event itself. You are not responding only to today. A sentence from years ago has entered the room. Imagine a small fire alarm connected to an entire building. One sensor detects smoke, and every siren activates. The warning may be useful, but the whole building now reacts to one signal. A complex behaves similarly. A small event activates an entire network of old meanings. The language becomes urgent, rigid, threatening, and if you believe it immediately, behavior follows. You withdraw, attack, chase, explain, apologize, control. Then the consequences of those actions appear and seem to prove the sentence. This is how words participate in repetition. Not by magic, through psychological sequence. A thought appears. The thought creates meaning. Meaning intensifies emotion. Emotion influences action. Action changes the situation. The situation then becomes evidence for the original thought. Imagine someone thinks they are losing interest. Fear rises. They begin demanding reassurance. The other person feels pressured and creates distance. The distance becomes evidence. I knew it. The sentence helped produce the result it predicted. This does not mean every fear is imagined. It means unconscious language can influence how events unfold. And the more absolute the language, the less room remains for reality to surprise you. This is why one of the most powerful practices is learning to recognize the tone of a complex. Not merely the content, the tone, urgent, catastrophic, total. It leaves no space, no uncertainty, no alternative interpretation. When you hear that voice, pause, not to silence it, to locate it. What part of me is speaking? How old does this voice feel? What does it believe is happening? What is it trying to protect? These questions create distance. The complex says, you are being abandoned. Consciousness asks, is abandonment happening now, or has distance activated an older fear? The complex says, you must prove yourself. Consciousness asks, what would happen if I did not? The complex says, you cannot trust them. Consciousness asks, what evidence belongs to the present and what belongs to the past? This is not positive thinking. It is psychological discrimination, separating present reality from inherited meaning. The sentence may still feel powerful, but now it is no longer alone. Another voice exists, the voice that observes, and every time observation appears, the old sentence loses some authority. You begin discovering that a thought can be present without becoming a command. A fear can speak without becoming a prophecy. A complex can activate without writing the next chapter of your life. That is where language stops controlling you and begins revealing you. Chapter 4. The persona speaks in sentences you think you must obey. There is another kind of language shaping your reality. It does not always sound fearful. Sometimes it sounds responsible, mature, socially acceptable. It says, I must be strong. I should never disappoint anyone. I need to keep everything under control. I have to be useful. I cannot let people see me struggle. These sentences often belong to the persona. The persona is the social identity developed to function in the world. It helps you adapt, work, build relationships, participate in society. The problem begins when the role becomes a prison. Imagine an actor who never removes the costume. The performance continues at home, in silence, even in dreams. Eventually, the person forgets where the role ends. The same thing can happen psychologically. Someone praised for being strong begins believing they must never need support. Someone rewarded for being agreeable learns that conflict threatens belonging. Someone admired for success becomes incapable of admitting uncertainty. The sentence becomes a contract. I must remain this person, or I may lose love. That hidden fear gives the persona its rigidity. And maintaining a rigid persona requires constant language. You remind yourself, be careful. Do not say too much. Keep smiling. Handle it alone. Do not upset anyone. The words regulate the performance. They protect the mask, but they also silence whatever does not fit the role. Anger, need, desire, vulnerability, exhaustion. Eventually, the rejected parts move into the shadow. Then the inner language becomes divided. One voice says, I am fine. Another part of the psyche says, no, you are not. One says, I don't need anyone. Another longs for connection. One says, I love helping everyone. Another carries resentment. This contradiction drains psychic energy, because part of you is constantly maintaining the official story, while another part is carrying the truth. Jung believed wholeness requires a more honest relationship between persona and shadow, not destroying the social self, but allowing the personality to become less rigid. The strong person can also say, I need help. The kind person can say, no. The independent person can receive. The successful person can admit fear. The peaceful person can express anger without becoming cruel. Language makes this integration possible, because before a new part of yourself can be lived, it often needs to be named. I am angry. I am tired. I want something different. I do not agree. I need time. This hurts me. These are simple sentences, but for someone whose identity was built around silence, they can be revolutionary. The external world may barely notice. Inside, a mask is loosening, a forgotten part is returning, and every honest sentence reduces the distance between who you appear to be and who you actually are. That is why authentic speech carries unusual power, not because it is loud, because it is coherent. The words, the emotion, and the inner reality move in the same direction. You no longer use language only to protect the role. You use it to express the person. And the more this happens, the less energy is wasted maintaining a life that does not fit. Chapter 5. Symbols speak where ordinary language fails. But the unconscious does not communicate only through sentences. Often, its deepest messages arrive before words, through dreams, images, metaphors, symbols. Jung believes symbols form one of the natural languages of the psyche. A dream may show a locked room, a collapsing bridge, a dark forest, a child waiting alone, a house with an unknown floor. These images are not simple dictionary codes. Their meaning depends on the person, the emotion, the context, the life being lived. But they often reveal something ordinary language has not yet reached. Imagine someone repeatedly dreaming of a house with sealed windows. Consciously, they insist everything is fine. Their words remain controlled. But the dream presents another image. Something inside is closed. Air cannot enter. Life cannot move freely. The symbol speaks before the person can explain. This is why language should not be reduced to literal sentences. The psyche creates meaning through images as well. A person may describe their life as being trapped, carrying a weight, walking on eggshells, standing at a crossroads. Notice how quickly the mind turns experience into symbol. These expressions matter. They reveal the form of the inner world. Someone who says, "I feel buried," may be describing more than sadness. Someone who says, "I am constantly fighting," may have organized their entire identity around conflict. Someone who says, "I cannot see a way out," may be living inside an unconscious image of enclosure. The symbol can become a prison, but it can also become a doorway, because once the image is conscious, it can change. Instead of asking only, "Why am I anxious?" you may ask, "If this anxiety were an image, what would it look like?" Perhaps a locked room, a storm, a frightened animal, a child hiding under a table. The image creates relationship. You are no longer dealing with an abstract enemy. You are listening to a part of the psyche, and sometimes a new image emerges. The locked room gains a window. The storm begins passing. The frightened animal is approached gently. The child is no longer alone. Jung used active imagination to enter this symbolic dialogue, not to escape reality, but to allow unconscious material to become visible. Because what cannot yet be spoken directly may first appear in symbolic form. This is also why the stories you tell about yourself matter. Are you always the victim, the rescuer, the outsider, the abandoned child, the misunderstood hero? Every identity carries a narrative, and every narrative gives you a role. A role determines what you expect, what you tolerate, what you repeat. The unconscious often organizes life through stories, long before you recognize that you are living inside one. The moment you see the story, you gain a new possibility. You can ask, "Is this the only role available to me? Must every chapter end this way? What part of the story have I never allowed myself to write?" The symbol does not give a simple answer. It opens psychological space, and inside that space, a different meaning can begin forming. Chapter 6. Change the language, not the truth. There is a mistake people often make when they begin noticing their inner dialogue. They assume every painful sentence must be replaced with something positive. "I am afraid" becomes "I am fearless." "I am struggling" becomes "everything is perfect." "I feel lost" becomes "I know exactly where I am going." But the psyche recognizes dishonesty. Repeating a sentence you do not believe does not create integration. It creates another mask. Jung was not interested in decorating the unconscious with pleasant language. He was interested in truth, and truth is often more precise than either pessimism or forced optimism. Imagine someone standing before a difficult decision. Their old inner voice says, "You cannot do this." A positive slogan says, "You can do anything." But perhaps neither sentence is entirely true. A more conscious sentence might be, "I am afraid, and I can still take one step." That language does not deny fear. It prevents fear from becoming the whole identity. Someone says, "I always destroy relationships." A more truthful sentence might be, "I have repeated patterns that damaged relationships, and I am beginning to recognize them." Notice the difference. The past is acknowledged, but the future is not sentenced. Someone says, "No one has ever understood me." Perhaps the conscious sentence becomes, "I have often felt misunderstood, and I am learning to express myself more clearly." again. No false promise, no denial, only a more complete truth. This is the language of integration. It allows opposites to exist together. I am wounded and capable of healing. I am uncertain and still moving. I feel anger, and I can choose what I do with it. I want connection, and I can maintain my boundaries. The ego often prefers absolute statements. The psyche is more complex. Human beings contain contradictions, strength and vulnerability, courage and fear, love and resentment, confidence and doubt. Jung believed wholeness does not come from eliminating one side. It comes from creating a conscious relationship between them. Language can support this process, not by pretending darkness does not exist, but by refusing to let darkness define the entire sky. Think about the sentence, "I am broken." It sounds final, complete. There is no movement inside it. Now consider, part of me is carrying pain. The pain remains real, but the person becomes larger than the pain. That small linguistic shift creates psychological space, and within that space, choice becomes possible. This is why the words, "part of me," can be so powerful. Part of me is afraid. Part of me wants to run. Part of me still seeks approval. Part of me does not trust this situation. The sentence recognizes the experience, without allowing one experience to occupy the entire identity. You become the container, not only the content. Jung's idea of the self points toward this larger center. The ego says, "This emotion is who I am." The self can hold many emotions without being reduced to any one of them. This is where mature inner dialogue begins, not with domination, with relationship. You stop commanding yourself. Stop insulting yourself. Stop treating every difficult emotion as evidence of failure. Instead, you listen. You ask, what is this feeling trying to protect? What does this part of me need? What belongs to the present? And what belongs to the past? The words become less violent, more curious, more honest. And curiosity changes the entire atmosphere of the psyche. Judgment closes. Curiosity opens. Judgment says, "Why am I still like this?" Curiosity asks, "What keeps returning here?" Judgment says, "I should be over this." Curiosity asks, "What has not yet been understood?" Judgment creates shame. Curiosity creates contact. And contact is what allows unconscious material to become integrated. You do not need to speak to yourself as though nothing is wrong. You need to stop speaking to yourself as though difficulty makes you unworthy. Chapter 7. Speaking differently changes what you are able to do. Words matter most when they become action. You can repeat, "I respect myself." But if you continue accepting what destroys your peace, the unconscious receives another message. You can say, "My needs matter," but if you never express them, the old pattern remains intact. Language becomes transformative when speech, emotion, and behavior begin moving together. Imagine telling someone, "This does not work for me." The sentence may contain only 6 words, but behind it, there may be years of conditioning, years of fear, years of believing that boundaries cause rejection. The external moment appears small. Psychologically, an entire identity is changing. The old persona says, "Keep everyone comfortable." The conscious voice says, "I also exist." This is why some sentences feel physically difficult to speak. "I need help." "No." "I disagree." "I am hurt." "I do not want this." "I changed my mind." The difficulty is not only social. The sentence threatens an old psychological structure. Perhaps you learned that needing help meant weakness. That disagreement meant danger. That saying no meant losing love. Then speaking consciously becomes an act of individuation. You are not merely communicating with another person. You are teaching your own psyche that a different way of existing is possible. Each honest sentence becomes evidence. I expressed a boundary and survived. I admitted uncertainty and was not destroyed. I disappointed someone and remained worthy. I asked for what I needed, and the world did not end. The unconscious learns through experience. Words alone may begin the process. Embodied words deepen it. This is why the language you use with others matters as much as the language you use inside. Some people constantly apologize before speaking. Sorry, but maybe this is silly. I could be wrong. The sentence begins by reducing the speaker, not because humility is wrong, because repeated self-erasure teaches both the speaker and the listener that the speaker's presence requires permission. A more conscious form of language does not need aggression. It needs clarity. This is what I think. This is what I can offer. This is what I cannot accept. This is what I need. Simple, direct, without endless justification. The more integrated a person becomes, the less energy they spend convincing everyone. Their words become cleaner, not because they are always certain, because they are less divided. They do not say yes while secretly meaning no. They do not smile while building resentment. They do not promise what they cannot give. Their speech begins reflecting their inner reality. And this coherence changes relationships. Some relationships improve, others become uncomfortable. Because people who benefited from your silence may resist your voice. People who relied on your confusion may dislike your clarity. People who knew only your persona may claim you have changed. They may be right. You are changing, but perhaps you are not becoming someone else. Perhaps you are becoming less willing to speak against yourself. That is a profound shift. For years, your words may have protected belonging at the cost of authenticity. Now, they begin protecting truth, not cruel truth, not careless speech, but speech that no longer requires self-betrayal. And when your language becomes more honest, your choices begin becoming more honest too. You leave what you once tolerated. You pursue what you once dismissed. You ask questions you once avoided. You stop participating in conversations that constantly diminish you. Slowly, the outer life begins reflecting the inner change. Again, not because language magically controls reality, because language changes participation. A person who can name what they want can pursue it more clearly. A person who can name what hurts can establish a boundary. A person who can name a pattern can interrupt it. A person who can name a dream can begin building it. What remains unnamed often remains difficult to change. Once named, it becomes visible. Once visible, it becomes possible to confront. This is the quiet power of words. They do not create everything, but they illuminate what consciousness is finally ready to see. Final chapter. The voice that becomes your future. Every day, you speak to yourself, sometimes through clear sentences, sometimes through fragments, images, memories, expectations. Most of this conversation happens quietly. No one hears it. No one corrects it. No one asks whether it is true. And yet, it influences the person who walks into every room, the person who makes every decision, the person who interprets every silence, every rejection, every opportunity, every act of love. For years, perhaps the voice inside you has repeated an old story. You are not enough. You must prove yourself. You cannot trust. You are too late. You always fail. You must remain strong. You cannot disappoint anyone. These sentences may have begun as protection, They may have helped you survive an earlier life, but survival language is not always suitable for a life that is ready to expand. Carl Jung believed becoming conscious means recognizing what has been speaking through you. The persona, the shadow, the complex, the wound, the inherited expectation. Each has a voice. Each carries meaning, but none of them alone is the whole of who you are. You are also the one capable of listening, the one capable of questioning, the one capable of saying, "This thought is present, but it is not the only truth." That realization does not silence every painful sentence. It creates something more valuable, freedom from automatic belief. The old voice says, "You cannot," and perhaps. You answer, "I do not know yet." The old voice says, "They will leave," and you answer, "I will not abandon myself in advance." The old voice says, "You must be perfect," and you answer, "I can be responsible without becoming cruel to myself." The old voice says, "Stay hidden," and you answer, "I can be seen without knowing exactly how others will respond." These are not magical phrases. They are conscious positions. Each one interrupts an old identity. Each one creates room for another response, another choice, another future. Imagine a sculptor working with stone. One strike changes almost nothing. Then another, for a long time. The shape remains unclear, but eventually, a face begins emerging. Inner language changes in the same way. One sentence may not transform your life overnight, but repeated conscious language, connected to conscious action, slowly reshapes the personality. You become less absolute, less imprisoned by always and never, less willing to turn one painful moment into a lifelong identity. You begin speaking to yourself as someone in development, not someone already sentenced. And perhaps that is one of the deepest forms of psychological maturity, to understand that your current condition is not your final definition. The words you inherited are not sacred. The labels placed upon you are not permanent. The sentences created by fear do not deserve unquestioned authority. You can listen, examine, keep what remains true, release what belongs to an older life. Then, speak again, more honestly, more precisely, more consciously. Because every time you describe yourself, you are not only talking about the past, you are also teaching your mind what kind of future it is allowed to imagine. So listen carefully to the voice that speaks when you fail, to the voice that appears when someone becomes distant, to the voice that comments when you look in the mirror, to the voice that tells you whether your dream is possible. Do not believe everything immediately. Do not attack it either. Ask where it came from. Ask what it protects. Ask whether it still belongs here. Then choose your next sentence consciously, because perhaps your reality is not being shaped by one grand declaration. Perhaps it is being shaped quietly by the words you repeat when no one else is listening. And the moment you begin changing your relationship with those words, you begin changing the person who hears them. That person will make different choices, accept different treatment, see different possibilities, speak with greater honesty, and slowly, the life around them will begin to look different. Not because reality obeyed a phrase, but because consciousness finally stopped obeying. A story that was never meant to last forever.